For today's search, we have, in the case of murder, how typical is it for the victim to know their killer? Okay, because I watch a lot of true crime and a lot of deception detective, and I've realized that 9 times out of 10, someone who has been victimized or unalived, it's typically someone that they knew, okay? So I find it very hard to believe that Brian Kohberger was a stranger to nearly everyone in this case, but somehow it still fell on him. So let's go over this. Mind you, one of the last people that saw Kaylee and Maddie was Jack Showalter. He was with them at the corner club. He called in to the police to let them know that he had been with Kaylee and Maddie up until about 2:45 a.m. that night. But what I find strange is he kept calling Kaylee Kylie. And if you watch Deception Detective, you would know through statement analysis that that's typically something someone would do to distance themselves from the crimes. So he was calling Kaylee Kylie, and Dylan in her interview was calling Ethan Chapman. There was also one other person who it felt like purposely butchered the name, okay? You went out with them, but you didn't even know her name. You were at the corner club with her and you didn't know that her name was Kaylee, not Kylie. Got it. So I asked Google. It says it is highly typical for a murder victim to know their killer according to recent data of the Bureau of Justice of Statistics. When the relationship can be identified, the vast majority of murder victims are killed by someone they know, such as an acquaintance, friend, or family member. Key statistics on victim-offender relationships. Known offenders versus strangers. In 2023 U.S. data, there were 3,527 victims killed by an acquaintance and 1,674 by a stranger. Overall known relationships. In 2021, 76% of female murder victims and 56% of male murder victims were perpetrated by someone known to them. Intimate partner homicide. Women are at a much higher risk of being killed by an intimate partner, spouse, or romantic partner. For homicides of females where the relationship was known, a significant percentage were killed by their husband or boyfriend. 34% of women murdered in 2021 were killed by a boyfriend. Acquaintances. A large percentage of victims are killed by non-familial acquaintances, friends, or neighbors. It just really makes me wonder because they said Kaylee had been being stalked, but then I thought about it. You know, it would be easy to stalk someone if, I don't know, a roommate was giving people the location of where the person was going to be going, or if they had their location information, which is something I'd love to know because it seems as if a lot of people at that college use Snap Map to identify where people were. And I've been against the Snap Map since day one because that's way too intimate. I can understand if you're sharing your location with your spouse or your partner or your best friend, but when it just can relay that information to anyone, that's a little weird. So they should definitely go through Snapchat because isn't it weird that that's one of the places Dylan was at in the middle of the night? That's one of the websites she was using. What was she doing on there? Then you know that Steve Goncalves said, I don't think that some of these people knew that everything on their phone could still be tracked of what they were doing. I don't think that they know that the phones held as much information as they do. If you heard screaming and saw a stranger in your house, what's the first thing you're going to do? I can guarantee you it's not going to be get on Snapchat. If she was really scared, why wouldn't she call 911? Why would you call your roommates or call anyone but the police? It makes no sense to me. Then I started listening again to Dylan's interrogation, and I find it highly strange that she kept bringing up that Kaylee had a new Range Rover and that she thought it was so crazy that Kaylee was able to afford her new car because she got a really good new job, and that Kaylee was even paying for her own college tuition. And it turns out that Dylan came from the least money of all of them. You guys know how jealousy works, dude. She got that car and it must have struck something inside of them. They were jealous. Kaylee wasn't even supposed to be there. It almost feels like she was lured out there. Then you think about it, and Dylan was never even in that sorority house until she was invited in. She was from a different sorority. And if you know anything about sororities and fraternities. If you're in a different house, a different sorority, they go at it. With all of Xana's defense wounds and having over 50 marks on her body, it feels to me like she was fighting off a woman, or she was fighting with a woman. Think about it. Dylan said she heard someone say to Kaylee, "Don't worry, I'm here to help you." It's obvious that was the second person in the home saying that they were there to help with the unalivings. What really blows my mind is there was 6 people supposedly in this house, okay? 2 that survived and 4 that didn't. If one man walked into a house with 6 people, you mean to tell me that 6 people couldn't fight off one man? My mom is 60 years old, and I promise you, we would have put that guy in a figure 4 so fast and broke his kneecaps. I'm not kidding. Then I was listening to part of Bethany's interview with the police, and the police specifically asked her, "Why is Dylan so hesitant to talk to us? Why does Dylan not want to talk to me?" Because you would think if your entire house was brutally unalived that you would want to speak to the people that could solve the crime. Unless you were a part of the crime and you didn't want to get busted. Because the amount of times that she says, "I don't remember," should be illegal. Them interrogators should have called that shit right there. Okay, well, you're going to need to start remembering a little bit harder. None of them were treated as suspects at all, but they're on the suspect list that was unredacted, that got released, that got taken back. And guess what? Jack DeCour was the number 1 suspect, and Dylan was also on that list. The other girls had been close for a long time. Dylan had just moved in 3 months before that. The fact that she kept saying, "Well, I don't know if it was real or if it was fake," and they're trying to play Koberger like he's the crazy one, who's to say that she's not crazy? Because, baby, the way that you did that interrogation interview, it sounded like you needed to be in a psych ward. And I'm not saying that to be mean. If you can't distinguish what's real or what's a dream or reality. And then that brings me back to the rugs. They said everyone knew about the rugs, bars, and addies. So did someone get drunk and take a bar and black out and do some things? I would love to see their toxicology or their blood tests or see what they actually had in their system, because if you ask her, she was one of the only ones who didn't do drugs. And when they asked her about Kaylee, she's like, "Kaylee would never." The way her tone changes when they talk about Kaylee lets me know everything I need to know. She was insanely jealous of her, and it's obvious by just the tone of her voice that changes. When she talks about Maddie and Ethan, it's different. Also, she distanced herself from Ethan and said, Ethan Chapman, Chafin, I don't know how to say his last name. Oh, but he's like a big brother to me. So wouldn't you know his name? Especially if he was living under the same roof as you? It's giving when she heard that, "I'm here to help you," it was someone coming to help her commit these crimes. The fact that the cops said that Hunter was his homeboy, they didn't find the knife sheath the first or second pass through from the cops, but the third time they did, which I find extremely ironic because the third time they walked through is when they found the supposed steak knife that was left upstairs as well. It makes no sense. Unless someone had more to do with the crime than they want to say. If touch DNA is transferable from object to object or person to person, or you can even get that from a handshake, who's to say that somebody hadn't just shaked Brian Koberger's hand, or the fact that he had all those traffic stops? Your ID would have a lot of DNA on it, because how many people, once you get an ID, ever think to wipe it off? You don't. You use it over and over and over again, so your skin cells would have shed it on there. Something's not right. And Midwest Chicken Shore Mama was right. It wasn't a quiet night in Moscow at all that night. I know, because I heard the screams. Thanks. Follow me for more. This case is crazy.